You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today we are talking with a brand that is rewriting the rules of ready-to-drink cocktails, Tip Top Proper Cocktails. CEO Nick Reely joins us.
Yeah, if you're in the RTD space or even thinking about it, this is an episode you're going to want to hear. Tip Top has grown into a top 30 brand in the RTD category, according to Nielsen, with sales up an incredible 72% year over year.
Even more impressively, in the high-proof RTD segment, Tip Top is number one, holding more than double the share of their closest competitor.
Yeah, and Nick shares how Tip Top has achieved that kind of velocity without just throwing product everywhere. We dig into their strategy for selecting distribution partners who think beyond traditional category lanes. The ones with a true growth mentality share a voice in very competitive portfolios.
We also talk about how Tip Top has leveraged unconventional channels like airlines to build national awareness, and why earned media, not paid campaigns, is really their go-to growth engine. You'll hear how collaborations with iconic bartenders and a people-first approach to leadership has really fueled the brand's rise.
Yeah, and for every drink entrepreneur out there, Nick drills into the metrics that really matter, from velocity and rebuy rate to net promoter score, and how to use each of these to keep your brand healthy and growing.
So get ready for a conversation that is packed with practical, no fluff insights on scaling an RTD brand in today's very competitive market. Here's our conversation with Nick Reely of Tip Top Proper Cocktails.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks. Welcome to Business of Drinks. We are so happy you could spend some time with us today.
Thank you, Scott. The pleasure is all mine. Really appreciate you having me on.
All right, let's dive right in. You have been with Tip Top Cocktails for about 3 years. You've been CEO for about 2-3 months. What's the thing that surprised you most as you've transitioned into this role?
Yeah, really good question. Joining in October of 2022 and to today, it's always been a very close-knit team with pretty transparent lines of working. We're a small group, sub 25 heads. So I would say the thing that surprised me the most is how little I've been surprised with the transition. It's been pretty smooth, pretty seamless, having lines of sight into other departments of the business on an ongoing basis, being involved with brand, finance, supply. There was no real proverbial skeleton in the closet that snuck up on me once I got into this position. Outside of the business, I would say there was one thing that caught me by surprise, but it was not our doing. It kind of happened to us. And that is commensurate to my timeline in transitioning to the CEO role. Food and Wine published their annual Game Changers issue, which is an issue that covers between 10 and 15 beverage or food brands that are transforming the way people eat and drink in the world for the better, enhancing people's lives, offering virtues, values, etc. So that came out right when I stepped into the CEO position. And we knew it was coming. We were incredibly honored to be recognized. With a lot of humility, we graciously accepted all the kind words they had to say about us. And we thought there'd be nice, positive halo effect. But I don't know that we were fully prepared for the windfall of brand love we would get after that. So that's been the biggest surprise. And we see that reflected not just in retailer outreach or in general fandom on socials, on our own channels, but also in velocity in store. So that's been the biggest surprise as I've sat into this position. And it's been incredibly fortuitous.
That's thrilling to hear. Always rather be bombarded by good news rather than bad. And I mean, the press has continually been incredible. I mean, I'm an avid reader of Wirecutter, and I just saw they did a RTD kind of roundup where they recommended 9 canned cocktails, and if I'm not mistaken, Tip Top secured 4 of those 9 slots, which was more than any other brand by a wide margin. But I digress. My own personal love for the brand. I want to steer back to questions.
No, we can stay on that. Let's just have the conversation around your personal love for the brand. It'll make this easy.
So before CEO and before even joining Tip Top as their chief sales officer in 2022, as I understand it, you mostly worked in beer, doing and managing sales at the Craft Brew Alliance, and then for the better part of a decade in sales and marketing for Pabst.
Mhm.
Is selling cocktails, selling RTDs, any different from selling beer, and how so?
I was incredibly lucky that I got my start in beverage at Craft Brew Alliance in Portland, Oregon, which is one of their tentpole territories in the country because that's where Widmer Brothers was born. And then I did move to Pabst Brewing Company for about a decade, had a chance to learn a lot there as they're a very sizable supplier. I would say what's the same is the fundamentals. You're navigating the three-tiered system, you're learning what motivates and makes tick customers at both levels, the distributor level as well as the retailer level. And those all apply to being in the canned cocktail game. Where there's also, of course, compliance differences, which that's not fun to talk about and pretty darn boring. So we'll skip. Where there's been the biggest difference, really, I don't think it's in the category shift in my experience. It's in the brand POV and TOV. And so that's where there's variance. Figuring out who's this brand's audience? What are the occasions that we're seeking to sort of occupy and to offer value? And how do we make that show up in our comms, in our content, and in our work product? So that's been the biggest gap. But the core fundamentals, I think, are consistent across the three-tiered system, whether you're in beer, whether you're in wine, or whether you're in spirits or a version of spirits like prepared cocktails.
I'm curious when it comes to understanding your consumer in that way. I imagine, and this is my guess here, with beer, one place you can start is with comps, where there's plenty of context and plenty of
Yeah.
competition, no matter how niche you are. With cocktails and RTDs, is that different because it's a more nascent category?
I think so. That's my perspective. I believe data is your friend. And so, beer, you're going to have an incredibly robust, statistically significant data set that you can refer back to that's been built over years, decades, even centuries. With RTDs, with prepared cocktails being more nascent, you have less of that to lean on. So, you need to kind of learn as you go. You can't say this is empirically true, this is institutionally been the case, here's where we fit, here's the occasions we satisfy. You're testing, learning, optimizing, iterating, and doing it all over again in RTD. So I think there is a little bit more blue ocean in that space versus, yeah, historical ways of working that you maybe feel obligated to adhere to.
And just to dive into that a little deeper, when the data is kind of parsed, uh, I find that there's a lot of emphasis on, is it a wine based RTD, a spirit based RTD, a malt based RTD? Do you think, or have you found, do consumers think about RTDs this way at all, or not?
Very good question. And I don't know if I can answer it in a way that's fact or fiction, But from my vantage point, we use those terms when we're very category familiar, when we either work in or work adjacent to the category. Consumers or shoppers who are up and down the aisles of C stores, liquor stores, grocery stores, club stores, I don't know that they care what the acronym RTD, RTS stands for. I don't know that they care if it's malt based, wine based, spirit based. I think they're just looking for something that meets their needs for whatever moment they're deciding to participate in. So the actual composition of the product, I think, is less important than what they get from the product.
Yeah, understood. So for context, Tip Top has enjoyed, I think it's fair to say, tremendous success in terms of growth over the last few years, and you've certainly been a part of that. Can you share a little for our listeners? How big is Tip Top? How fast is the brand growing?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at, we'll say year to date through the end of June, so we have a half year sample size. We've now gone from a very cute Instagrammable brand to a sizable player in the RTD space. So something I'm incredibly proud of based on the work our team has done, the work our distributors have done, and the opportunities the retailers have given us. All that to say, we're now a top 30 brand in the RTD category within Nielsen. If you look at not just brand size, but rate of growth, we're a top 15 brand. We're growing at 72% versus same time last year. And then you can start to cut the RTD category into subcategories. And one of the subcategories is high proof, not by my definition, but by Nielsen's definition. And when it comes to high proof RTD brands, we're number one. 52 share of the high proof category, again, growing at 72%. That's more than two and a half the share of the second player and growing 2.5 times faster than the second player. So we have some good tailwinds. We've grown to be of material size, but the growth we have today, and I truly believe this, is the start of the story. We don't feel like the job is done. We're not celebrating that we have this growth. It's great to have, but we know that there's still a lot more run room for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, congratulations on that growth. And now,
Thank
what
you.
I think a lot of people are probably curious about that are listening is, what do you believe or understand is the driver or drivers of this growth? Things particular to the brand and or macro, circumstances.
Yeah, there's some fundamental basic things that when the gears turn, you're going to get growth. Additive distribution that's incremental to last year, not just stores, but points of distribution in stores. But to sort of put numbers around that, our distribution's up about 20%, whereas our sales dollars are up 70%. So we're not just growing by virtue of adding Tip Top into more places, we're seeing more demand once it is placed. And I think the demand comes from us having a differentiated, distinctive, and high quality product, but also broader consumer wants and needs. Consumers want turnkey, high quality offerings that are very low touch for them. And it's my perspective, we've been conditioned to want these turnkey things. It's on demand gratification, whether it's through streaming, you touch something on your phone and you can watch whatever you want right there. Music, you touch Spotify, you can listen to whatever you want right there. Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever meal you want will be at your front porch within 30 minutes or less. So people have been conditioned to want good things right then with a low lift. And Tip Top offers that. So I think that's another reason that we've seen growth is we are sitting squarely where they want products to be. And that's been to our benefit too.
Yeah, it's a brand that I'd say is immediately understandable. Even the cans are sized where one isn't questioning, am I getting one or two cocktails, right? It's pretty straightforward. You know, Thinking about the ever evolving distributor landscape, right? This is a topic that I think is particularly pertinent to folks who are interested in canned cocktails and RTDs, right? Historically, distributors, beverage alcohol distributors, they specialize. They might have focused on fine wine or spirits. And right top of everyone's mind with Ray's, a beer focused distributor in California, having taken on spirits like Tito's and the Gallo portfolio, folks
Mhm.
are beginning to kind of question this traditional wisdom that you kind of stay in your lane. Now, you came from the world of beer and are familiar with distributors. Who does Tip Top work with distributor wise? Is there a criteria that you have when it comes to a distribution partner, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, so in the 25 states we're available, we have 16 unique distributors. So obviously the math says, we have some distributors in multiple territories. When I first came into the business and we were building our route to market and I was vetting what options we had, the options have to be reciprocal. So we would have to want to go somewhere, and equally the distributor would have to want us. And I can appreciate how coveted those slots are in their portfolio, how coveted those space allocations are in their warehouse. So it's not that any brand can come to them and they say, sure, we'll take you tomorrow. Just like we're looking for certain things, so are they. And I don't mean to speak for distributors. I've never had the pleasure of working on that side of the business, but I think it's reasonable to believe that a key objective is to have a fair share of the market that they work within. And so as they've gone from maybe singular model in one particular bev out category to a more widely spread model with participation across all bev out categories, I think that's simply them working towards the objective of maintaining or growing their share when they see consumer shift across categories and share change across categories. So it would be remiss of them to say, this is what we did, it's what we've always done, but this category is losing share. Let's stay in it, yet expect to gain share of the market. Those two things don't match. So they've had to evolve their thinking. And I think they've done an incredible job at future proofing their books of business, evolving the way that they previously did business to ensure that they could stand the test of time. So for us, as we look at those distributors, we were evaluating which ones are of this growth mentality, of this evolution mentality, and aren't necessarily stuck in place. We also look at basic things that any supplier would: coverage in market in terms of sales personnel, access to key accounts, which will give us great physical availability and build brand awareness. Also, frequency of merchandising to accounts, because it's one thing to get the authorization or mandate, it's another to have the shelf be totally empty. So we need a certain level of high touch service. And then also share a voice. We wanted to go with a distributor where we knew, despite however robust their portfolio was, Tip Top would have an opportunity to sit at the table and be involved in the conversation. So those are the things we looked at: reputation, white glove service. Some things you can't necessarily quantify, but you can qualify, were certainly also a consideration. But we think we found a sweet spot. I mean, the distributors that we have today have helped us go from a small burgeoning brand that was primarily available on an airline to a top 30 brand in Nielsen that's available in a lot of excellent independent accounts across America, great on-premise outlets, and also some key chains. So we're happy with the choice we made, and we think there's still a lot of benefit to be had for both parties as we continue to scale.
Got it. Got it. In your ideal circumstances, how far out do you like to plan working with a new distributor? Is that a 3-month process, 6-month process, longer? How far, when you're looking at a new market that you haven't yet been in, are you engaging in conversations that are serious about engaging with a new distributor?
I would say conversations can start a year in advance because you want to ensure you have alignment from a values perspective, but timing is a key ingredient in the recipe of success. So even if we're both agreed that we'd like to partner together, is it the right time to enter the market based on potential external factors that are happening then? Is it really noisy that time of the year in the category, which means maybe you don't get the share of mind you want, therefore the execution you'd like to see? Are we prepared from an inventory and stock level to satisfy pipeline fill plus rebuy rate? So there's some stuff like that that goes into it too. But I would say conversations at 12 months, and then really all systems go 120 days out.
Got it. So diving into and looking at the Tip Top portfolio, if I can call it that, there are a lot of recognizable cocktails, margaritas, espresso martinis. But what is your best selling SKU, and what does the pie chart look like? What percentage of sales does that SKU account for, if you would?
Yeah, we have 12 cocktails that are available, I'll say, every day. Not in all stores, but our distributors can order them. And as long as they're carrying, our retailers can order them every day of the year, 365. Of those 12, there's a clear front runner. And it's probably not surprising because if you just go into Google Analytics, what is the most popular cocktail in the world? This is the answer you're going to get. So, as margarita is the best seller for many brands, it is also the best seller for Tip Top. And that, I say bestseller, but you can give me a way you want to define it, and that answer is going to be consistent. So whether it's in our internal depletions measurements, whether it's in Nielsen dollar sales, whether it's in dollars per store, which would suggest it's the fastest moving seller in terms of velocity, it's all of the above. It's also the cocktail in which we've got a double gold medal from San Francisco Spirits Competition, a score of 95 from Wine Enthusiast. So it's one we're incredibly proud of, the quality too. So the sales results match what we put into the can.
And in that way, does that being the number one SKU, does that drive the strategy? Is it go out and place the margarita because we know it's a winner and we know that the other SKUs will follow? Or is it, get a toe in the door with, Naked and Famous, and then when they're ready, they'll turn on to the margarita?
It's a little of both. I think it's incumbent on us as a supplier to try and offer the most value we can to a retail partner when they trust us with that share of shelf. So if we know that it's going to churn the fastest and drive the most revenue for them, then it would behoove us to suggest it for placement. If they are looking for something more differentiated, something that there aren't 10, 5, maybe even 3 other offerings of in the category, then we can cover that need as well. Whether it's with Naked and Famous, like you mentioned, Paper Plane as well. We also have Jungle Bird, which won Best in Class and Double Gold at San Francisco Spirits Awards in 2024, which is a tiki classic and kind of a bartender's handshake. If you know, darling. So we have all the bases covered.
Yeah. In terms of channel strategy, where does Tip Top kind of focus its efforts and resources? And is it dependent upon what channel you're in? And by that, I mean, in an on premise, maybe you push the more obscure cocktails because there's a bartender, there to that doesn't want to make a jungle bird.
Right.
And in the off premise, the margarita, is recognizable to the consumer. How do you think about channel strategy?
Yeah, I really think of our product utilities and again, where we can offer the most value. And anywhere there's not a fully stocked back bar with a wide spread of spirits, anywhere there's not shakers, tins, long spoons, and anywhere there's not a great bartender to make something is where we can best serve people. And that's generally in an at home environment or in a non premise environment where people are grabbing and going, participating in their preferred hobby and living their life, something outdoors. So our channel strategy is to lean into the off premise heavy. There's a long way to answer your question. And within the off premise, we participate in liquor, we participate in grocery, we participate in mass, we participate in club, but really off premise is where we invest our time and where we invest our resource. And that's not to say that we don't have a place in the on premise, but to go back, on premise has fully stocked bars, great bartenders, shakers, tins, and long spoons to make drinks. So if those drinks can be made there, then perhaps the need for Tip Top is reduced, but the enjoyment of consumption of Tip Top still remains. So we can offer solutions to those proprietors as well, particularly if they're looking for speed of service and they don't want people waiting in a queue. If they want to have an in-room option, hotels is a nice channel of business for us, as well as resorts. So if people want a bar quality cocktail in room, off the menu or in the mini bar, or grab and go at check-in, that's been something that we found to be incredibly fruitful as well, not just for us, but for those hotels and resorts that carry us.
Got it. And speaking of kind of, more obscure channels, not necessarily obvious ones, Tip Top has notably been served on Delta Airlines.
Mhm.
And, I imagine it's fair to say that airlines are not your typical customers or any brand's typical customers. So I've got a few questions on this topic that are likely on the minds of a number of our listeners. First, how does a brand even land an airline as a customer? What is that process like?
Mhm. I wish I could give you the full scoop on how that happened, but it was before my time at Tip Top. So the point of origin of that conversation and how it truly came to be, I don't know. But I think a lot of it has to do with serendipity, and timing is everything. So if they were looking for more turnkey solutions to reduce the number of items required in their inventory to give their flyers and their loyal customers a great cocktail experience, then I could see how they would say, let's test out Tip Top. It was still barely beyond an idea at the point in which we struck the Delta partnership, yet to get out to the general market at scale. So I would say there wasn't substantial proof of concept. So for them to put their faith and their trust in this brand, um, we're incredibly grateful for. The platform that it afforded us for building brand awareness, consideration, and driving trial is immense. And it's inarguable, I think, that it was a big reason for our success so far.
Yeah, understood. It sounds like an incredible platform, billboard, if you will.
Mhm.
So even though maybe you weren't there at the inception of landing Delta as a customer, you're enjoying the reality of working with them now. I'm curious, are there special considerations a brand should have in mind with when it comes to working with an airline? Even something so simple as logistics, right? Are you supplying this at just a few key hubs? Do you need to be in every state, or just one or two key places where they're sourcing their product? Can you share a little there?
Yeah, I would say if you have an opportunity to work with an airline that's going to give you that platform for awareness and consideration and trial, do it. Whatever steps are required in terms of logistics, drop off points, hub and spoking, etc., it's worth it. It's worth the effort. So, without getting into all the specifics, I would just say it's a huge opportunity for new to world brands to make a name for themselves and to build a base of customer love. So when people land at their final destination, they seek you out in the traditional trade.
Got it. So when we're talking about traditional channels and kind of getting bang for your buck, in terms of advertising and promotion, A&P, is there a particular area that Tip Top likes to focus to kind of get a return on its advertising and promotion?
Yeah, I mean, we're a very scrappy business and we don't put a ton of reinvestment rate into traditional through the line marketing campaigns that are going to have mass reach, multiple markets, long flight periods, etc. So we really rely on earned media. We also know from whether it's WARC studies or IWSR, earned media is about 90+% more trusted than paid media. So when you get it, you can get more reach than you would have got through paid. Plus, it has higher levels of resonance and adoption. So we look to that as our major vehicle for advertising and promotion. Now, we have to do things that warrant us being talked about and warrant us winning those headlines versus other brands in the space, and not just RTD or Bev Alc, but really food and beverage in general. So we've used innovation as a or product, I shall say, as a major way to drive those headlines. And that's been well received and had positive results. We've used collaborations with icons of the cocktail community and industry, like Sam Ross from Violet Hour and Attaboy, like Joaquin Simo when we did our Naked and Famous. So earned, earned is the way we roll, but the onus is on us to figure out how we generate it.
Yeah, and can you share a little bit more about innovation as a way of kind of getting that earned media? Can you provide an example?
Yeah, I think so. When we came out with the collaborations with Sam and Joaquin last year, two of them were with Sam, Paper Plane and Penicillin. And these were drinks that nobody had necessarily dared to put into a ready to drink or to a ready to serve format yet. There are also drinks that are burgeoning, I think, on a lot of menus at the moment and have a lot of buzz in the zeitgeist right now. So for us to put them in a prepared cocktails format was a little bit eyebrow raising and sort of WTF, and it got people's attention. So we saw a lot of talk value there, not just on social, but also in traditional media headlines from really entrusted media outlets as well. So that's what I'd be referring to.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. No, when the inventor of the cocktail signs off on your can version, I
Yeah.
imagine that that's an incredible, signal
And,
to the
and when you
general
get to
market.
digitize his face and put it on the side of the 100 milliliter can as well, there's some stock in that too. So,
Absolutely. Having your experience in sales and now as CEO, is there a particular brand metric, SKU metric, customer metric that you think is the most telling when judging the health of your company or the direction you're taking Tip Top?
The marketer in me would want to say things like NPS, Net Promoter Score, but we're not there. Again, we're a new to world brand. We don't have all these campaigns that we can pull data points from to really measure stuff like that. So we do a lot of high touch, sort of social scrubbing to hear, see, and feel what people are saying about us. It's not uncommon to catch our team in the Reddit threads, deep in the archives, reading what people have to say about Tip Top. But that's not how we're going to measure the health of our brand. That's just an offshoot comment. How I would look at the health of our brand through a variety of ways, but just to name a few, I'm going to look at velocity in the category relative to the average brand. So we need to make sure we're paying our rent on shelf. We need to make sure we're turning at a clip that's going to keep a retailer happy and it's going to exceed their hurdle rates. And I want to make sure we're doing that well above the average brands that are in our competitive set. So I'm always going to look at velocity in terms of dollars per store and units per store. I also want to look at rebuy rate. People can ask for favors and get a product placed in a store. It's the rebuy rate that signals if it worked and if you're healthy. So we set a benchmark for what we want to see rebuys at. And I'm happy to report we're above that benchmark. So that's a good sign to me. We're also going to look at talk value through that earned media wins. So is there any relevancy to our brand and our accredited, respected outlets eager to write about Tip Top? And we have a lot of earned media love in the past, which we're incredibly fortunate to have received. But those are three things that I would keep my eye on from my current position to tell if we are in a spot where we're flourishing and a spot where we're thriving, or if we're in maybe a risky position that requires some mitigation.
And to that end, for potentially someone who is an entrepreneur starting a company that might not have access to maybe the same data sources, is figuring out what might be a great reorder rate, a good velocity, as simple as talking with their customers and saying, like,
Yeah.
what does good look like? Is it that simple?
I think it's a question you have to ask because it's always in the eye of the beholder. So one person may think good looks like X, but if the retailer carrying your product thinks it looks like X plus 50%, then you're kind of in the mud. So getting their input on what they want to see and what's going to keep them satisfied, that's what the goal should be.
Great. I'm curious. I've begun asking this of more and more guests, but as the CEO of a drinks company, how do you spend your time? What does the pie chart of your day or your week look like?
Yeah, 30% stress, 30% excitement. No, if we're talking activity, not emotion. I had a mentor in a previous business who used to say people first, and that really resonated with me. And it's something I've tried to carry with me through my career. So, where I've been putting my time in the limited time, I've been in the CEO seat, but I did so even when I was in the CSO seat, is into our people. So, they are our greatest asset, building out a learning and development agenda for them, figuring out ways we can upskill them to make them more productive, but also more prepared for whatever they do next. People don't stay with a single employer for the entirety of their lives, right? They move on to other pastures, maybe not always greener, but other. So getting them prepared to be, even if it's 1% better, is important to me. So I really spend a lot of time on people. I would say that's probably 50% of my time. And then customer facing as well. Real stuff happens on the boardwalk, not a boardroom. A different mentor of mine also said that. So making sure that I'm in the market, or at least virtually like this, like we are, Scott, having conversations with customers so I can understand what they're seeing in their stores, what areas they're expanding space in, what areas they're cutting space from, is incredibly important. And hearing that through the grapevine versus first person is totally different. So I like interfacing, interacting with customers to get their POV one-to-one. And that's at both levels of the three-tiered system, distributor and retailer. I'd probably say I spend about 30% of my time customer facing. And then 20% into the nuts and bolts of the business, which is supply and finance. We need to ensure that we have a fast and accurate supply chain that's ready to satisfy demand when our brand is in explosive growth, and that we're building our supply chain for what we expect demand to be tomorrow, not what it was last month. So getting ahead of that, I'm very lucky to have an excellent head of supply in this business. So he can help make me better too. But I spend time with him and we make sure that we're prepared for what's to come. And then also with finance, do we have the right cash available to fund and fuel this growth on an ongoing basis, and making sure nothing slips through the cracks there? That's really the division of it. A lot of time on the brand too, but that's, brand is with people. So spending time with the marketing team in that first 50% of people development. And then also when it comes to customer facing, there's brand involvement there because obviously they're interacting with our customers too.
Wonderful. I look at as someone, my home state's New Jersey, boardwalk, definitely over boardroom.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Had not heard that. Love that. I'm curious and kind of beginning to wrap things up. Is there anything that you can share? What's kind of on the horizon for you and Tip Top, if you're able to share anything that we might anticipate?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in our early stages of life. So, doing more of what we're already doing is really the objective, and getting us to greater scale, making our cocktails more accessible because we know people want them, we know people enjoy them, we know people love them and look for them. So, it's scaling up what we're already doing, making a bigger impact that way, and then stepping and repeating some things that we've done from a programming perspective that have also been fruitful for us. So innovation never stops. We want to continue to dare to put things in cans that other brands wouldn't or choose not to. We owe that to the category. It's a promise we make to ourselves internally, but putting Naked and Famous in a can probably wasn't on a lot of people's innovation pipeline in calendar year 2024, but we did it. So how can we do more stuff like that? Continuing to collaborate with real tastemakers within the cocktail community and making those connections, using our brand as a platform to get some of their great work into the world too. That's what we want to keep doing, and tapping into more key accounts ultimately drives consumer packaged goods. And at the end of the day, we are one. So that's important to us too.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today on Business of Drinks. It was great
Thank you.
learning about, yeah, it was great learning about you and Tip Top. And again, appreciate your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much again for having us, Scott.
Well, welcome back to Last Call. This is Caroline, and I'm joined by Erica and Scott. Today, we are answering a listener question that came in regarding a recent episode with Nick from No Sleep Ventures. The question is, what fundraising advice do you have for brands that are too small for VC, as in under $1 million in revenue? The listener went on to note that No Sleep Ventures targets brands with above $1 million in sales, and 9 out of 10 brands looking for funding are probably lighter than $1 million a year in sales. So, what other funding sources are available to brands at an earlier stage? Scott?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first, let's put some metrics on this, right? The person that wrote in said, maybe 9 out of 10 are sub $1 million revenue. The Small Business Administration tracks some of these things, and the SBA calculates that 99.9% of businesses in the US are classified as small businesses. And they go on to say that, about 9% of these small businesses generate more than 1 million. So the listener's idea that 9 out of 10 are kind of small brands is absolutely spot on. There's no one easy answer to how these smaller brands succeed, but there are a few strategies. First, let's get into some of the reasoning why strategics might be a little wary of some of these smaller companies that aren't generating a ton of revenue. And that is because, most businesses in alc, beverage, or in general just don't succeed. They don't make it for the long term. And a $1 million revenue mark, and more realistically these days, $2 to $3 million in revenue, acts as a natural filter for understanding if there is product market fit beyond one's, just immediate footprint, and understanding if the founders know what they are doing and can execute and or figure out how to get above that $1 million, right? It is just a filter. It's not about liking the brand or loving the founders. It's about seeing if it can kind of reach this hurdle. So, if you are smaller than $1 million in terms of revenue, what do? There are a number of places you can turn. Grants, angels or angel groups, friends and family, probably pretty obvious, high net worth individuals. You want to kind of create a investment pipeline, be it spreadsheet or way of tracking this, and cast the net as wide as possible in terms of just gathering resources, but really have a process in terms of making sure that you are targeting folks that are interested in the category and or what you've done. That might be local, since that tends to resonate, right? If you're based in New York, you're more likely to score points with a angel group that is based in Westchester or Buffalo or New York City than you might in Anaheim, California. Keeping in touch with these folks is really key. So maybe having an initial conversation, but keeping them updated on your successes and or your challenges, because it might not be a question of if, but really a question of when. And there are macro forces at hand with interest rates, with tariffs that might make them a little bit more reticent, but those things change. And establishing the relationship in as far advance as possible is extremely, extremely useful for investors, because they're not starting from scratch when they're really ready to dive in with you.
Yeah. And, just to add to that, I think you covered all the major channels of investment for smaller brands. But I kind of a broader issue I wanted to bring up is that brands should not be afraid that there is not going to be any investment ever again. I keep on hearing this from founders that, it's so hard to find investment. And I found a small glimmer of hope in a counter narrative from Capstone Partners, which is an investment banking firm. Earlier this year, they released their beverage report looking at merger and acquisition activity in the beverage sector, and they compared 2024 to 2023. Now, I think that everyone that I have talked to recently would say like merger and acquisition activity and investment activity really dropped in 2024. However, they found that M&A activity actually rebounded in 2024. It was up 21% year over year in 2024. And they found that buyer appetite was widespread across the beverage industry, with each segment recording year over year jumps in transaction activity. And so who was driving that growth? It was the strategic buyers like the Pernod Ricards and the Diageos, that they were continuing to drive deal volume. They accounted for more than 3/4 of the total sector transactions. And that was for the 6th year running. And private companies comprised the majority, about 83% of strategic M&A transactions. And another sort of point to add to that is looking at private equity investment. Now that rose in 2024 for the first time since 2021. And this report found that fund managers were showing a lot of interest in wine and spirits acquisitions in particular. So I just point to this to say, like, look, even once you get to that higher level, like, it's don't give up hope that funding is never coming back to the beverage or beverage alcohol space, because there are investments happening. There's companies that are being acquired. There is continued activity in this area. And in fact, the beverage report from Capstone suggested that they see this continuing to rise in 2025. So a little glimmer of hope there.
I love a positive story. But that's all we have time for. So thank you for joining us on The Business of Drinks. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tap the notification button so you do not miss our weekly episodes. And please help us spread the word. Click those star ratings and share on social, or just send it to a friend. It really helps us find some new listeners. And finally, if there's anything you'd like us to cover on the podcast, our inbox is open on Instagram, LinkedIn, or you can send us an email at podcast@businessofdrinks.com. Thanks again. We'll talk to you later.